John Fredericks Radio Network, FM 99.1, 103.9 in Chicago. America's Voice, the streaming platform of the Trump revolution. On Newsmax TV, now in 70 million homes. Throughout the world on IRRS. And, of course, subtitled in Mandarin by G News, GTV, and G Media for the Chinese Communist Party intelligence apparatus to see, and also for the free people yearning for freedom in China to listen to and to watch. I want to thank all of our distribution partners. It's Monday, the 22nd of June, the year of our Lord, 2020, on a weekend where actually the words "Voice of Bannon" played on CNN on Brian Stelter. Right? Is that show? Does that show get like 9 people watching on Sunday afternoons? No, he was. Here's the thing with Stelter. On the and we'll get the clip up later. But here's the thing with Stelter and the reporter from the Washington Post is on there, who Sarah Ellison, who I think completely dropped the ball. And this shows you their spin. Her article had in there, of course, it was buried. The Voice of America situation is because of all these dissidents and freedom movement people and the Mara Monahans and the Mike Horowitz and these people that have worked with Chinese dissidents on the Tiananmen Square, the organ harvesting, the Falun Gong, the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan Buddhists, the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, just go across the board. Underground House Christians, Underground Catholic Church. It's 30 groups have said for decades now, but particularly focused on Libby Liu and Amanda Bennett, that they're running dogs of the Chinese Communist Party. That what's the problem is that they are pro-CCP. They're pro-CCP, and they put up pro-CCP propaganda. That's buried down in kind of paragraph 10 of the Washington Post story. We see, hey, what the controversy is about. This is not to turn it into a pro-Trump apparatus. It has nothing to do with pro-Trump. It's about the situation with their primary focus, right, which is really doing news and investigative reporting, not soft features to support the Chinese Communist Party. This is not Steve Bannon. This is coming from the voice of these people. Those are the ones that have been complaining. And Brian Stelter didn't mention. It just shows you why, A, the show's irrelevant. I never want to punch down, so we're not going to punch down. Why the show's irrelevant. But also the lies and misinformation. Now, we have, as Raheem Kassam in the National Pulse, which you're on fire in your breaking investigative news. I think everybody in conservative media, in all media, have to use you with a young, dedicated staff that really is breaking important stories every day that eventually the media picks up. But more importantly, you're causing change, right? Because things get picked up and all of a sudden you see actions taken because, hey, the National Pulse started with it, about this CNN situation. Yeah. And I think Zucker and these guys have got to answer for this, right? And yesterday's Stelter situation is a perfect example of really CCP propaganda. They turned it into like a pro-Trump. No, it has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with things about President Trump or not President Trump. This is about the Chinese Communist Party and using a taxpayer-supported apparatus as another voice of theirs. Their information where they're all over, right? And Blanchett didn't quite get to the heart of it today, although I'm glad the Wall Street Journal has it. And the book is supposed to be a terrific book that's just out. Yep. But talk to me about CNN's involvement with the Chinese Communist Party. Talk about CNN people being on the payroll of the yes, you heard that. The payroll of the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, I agree with you. In terms of the Wall Street Journal op-ed, Jude Blanchett, it's worth reading, and there is one significant pull-out that I think is hyper-relevant, which is about, in fact, it's something I read a long time ago. I think it was Robert Baer who wrote this book, See No Evil, back in the day.
Yes,
it's a great book.
About Saudi Arabia, right?
And what he wrote was the lack of U.S. intelligence assets in the region on the run-up to all the major conflicts that the U.S. had faced there, yes. And how, if they had got ahead of it by 6 months, by 12 months, and what it included was local language speakers that they just didn't have in the U.S. intelligence apparatus to actually deploy on the ground. Here, what we're talking about and what we're seeing in this Wall Street Journal op-ed is about the things coming out of China that actually the U.S. Public and the English-speaking audiences around the world don't get on their news, in their inboxes. And one of the things that Blanchett says, the recommendations, is the U.S. should start translating materials from China and Russia and making them publicly available, including every Xi Jinping speech, made available within the English language within 48 hours using machine learning and translating software and things like that. And actually, it would make the world of difference. And it would especially make the world of difference, Steve, because the Chinese Communist Party have apparatus at their hands in the form of Western journalists who push their narratives into the English-speaking audience. And I will give you an example using a story that we're publishing later today, an exclusive on the newly designed National Pulse website. So go and check it out, guys, thenationalpulse.com. And the story is, we have highlighted here at least 5 former CNN anchors and correspondents who now work for Chinese state media.
Stop. That's impossible.
Okay. Well, you are going to see it. The China Global Television Network, CGTN, a registered foreign agent in the United States, an integral outlet in the Chinese state-owned media landscape, employs former CNN correspondents and anchors. And I can give you a list of names, Sean.
Stop. Give people what CTGN, well, how important it is and how big this apparatus is and why it was built in London.
Well, CGTN was actually identified as, quote, a long-standing weapon in Beijing's arsenal of repression. And their raison d'etre is, quote, to attack designated enemies of the Communist Party. This is their propaganda news organization controlled directly from the CCP's publicity department. It is riddled with just anti-US, anti-Trump content, and was actually forced to register with the Foreign Agents Registration Act. This was the act, by the way, that was passed to find out Nazi sympathizers in the U.S.
Give me that again.
The Foreign Agents Registration Act. They've had to register at this. The U.S. government has forced CGTN staff to register.
This is Mike Pompeo made this decision with the president back in this, I think, the spring of this. It was during the pandemic, but it was coming anyway, right? They actually make them register as foreign agents, not media. Remember, the Obama administration and all the other administrations have looked the other way. These are hardcore, not even just propaganda. I mean, pure state information coming from a hardwired state apparatus. Finally had to be registered as foreign agents, and their heads blew up. Remember, this is when they started blowing back on the Washington Post and everything like this. But CTGN is one of that, correct?
That is correct.
So that would mean one of these CNN anchors or former correspondents would have to register as a foreign agent. Would that be correct?
5 CNN former correspondents and anchors, and we're looking into what their registration is right now. But here's the thing, and again, we're publishing the story later today. There's still detail to go through and double check, but these details that I'm reading off here are correct. Sean Caleb's, currently employed as national correspondent at CGTN America, was a CNN correspondent for over 20 years and served as a diplomat in Afghanistan for the U.S. State Department.
Wow. Who else? You're going to name other names? You're going to wait to we're going to have to leave hanging so we get clicks on the National Pulse today. Look, that you're not a patriot.
These ties don't buy themselves. No, we've got the names Anand Naidu, Karina Huber, Asiye Namdar, Jim Spellman. There's a whole list of names that we have here that we're popping up later today, and we're going to give you their bios, who they are, how they ended up going from CNN to CGTN, and again, exclusively on the National Pulse.
Has Zucker answered this, or what's the little hand puppet over there? Stelter? Reliable Sources. Has Reliable Sources had to answer this about why his compadres are now all agents of the Chinese Communist Party?
I'll be interested to see what Facts First CNN has to say about this. Of course, they never cover anything as it relates to their own network's malfeasance, even though Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy and these guys claim to be fair and neutral reporters and actors. In fact, Fox News even covers the ongoings at Fox News, but CNN actually usually turns a blind eye to its own misgivings within its organization. So I don't expect that we'll get a response from CNN's PR department, but we have a query out.
Is this show that these correspondents, when they get let go by these operations or whatever, are so desperate to make a buck and have no other transferable skill set that they basically have to sell themselves out to the enemies of the Alliance of Liberty?
Well, remember we saw this with Russia Today as well. You had a lot of Western news correspondents and anchors go over to Russia Today when it first started its English language presentations, both in the United Kingdom and the United States. And really what was happening back then, and I suspect it's probably happening with CGTN as well, I'm not sure we'll be able to get our hands on their HR documents, but they pay well over the odds for these people to come over. They see it as a point of prestige. In fact, CGTN has in Sean Caleb's bio on their own website that he comes from 20 years experience at CNN, has a whole paragraph about his experiences at CNN with CNN headline news and in the anchor chair when Saddam Hussein was captured in Iraq. So they have this whole thing. And so for these quote unquote journalists, they see a big fat paycheck that they could have never received working for a Western journalistic outfit or any kind of media outlet here. So for them, it's probably a matter of the bottom line.
I want to go in a couple of minutes we've got left here is to go back to Saturdays. A lot of people may not have had a chance. If you get up on the podcast, make sure you spend some time this week catching up on the two specials we did on information warfare on Saturday. We had Francesco Gagliate from Policy Sonar in Italy, absolutely the most brilliant political analysis and geopolitical analyst in, I think, Europe, but particularly Italy, talking about his new book that's not in English called Red Contagion, how Italy is becoming, or Italy is the new Trojan horse for the Chinese Communist Party in the West. Absolutely brutal. And he lays it right on the doorstep of Pope Francis. I mean, he is absolutely brutal in his deconstruction of the secret deal that Pope Francis signed with the Chinese Communist Party. But here's what I'm so proud of. We've been talking about unrestricted warfare, information warfare. You've taken the bull by the horns. The most amazing piece of the 2 hours, because we take both against America and the world, is Miles Guo's on there with you, Raheem. We got Jack Posobiec talking about this Stanford observatory, this Stanford analysis of social media. And you now have got the Wall Street Journal with Blanchett with their new book about I think it's called The New Red Guards. This is all, you're seeing that people are now focusing on what modern warfare is about. You can compare and contrast that with Bob Gates's book and really Ambassador Bolton's book to see the difference between, Trump and what people are trying to do that's cutting edge versus this kind of, everything's got to be kinetic warfare. Just summarize quickly, because we're going to come back to this, that the information warfare, the CCPs, and it's broad-based.
Yep.
You got both CTGN hiring CNN correspondents. You've got still nobody. Jake Tapper, the most important part of Navarro in this combative interview yesterday, Navarro throws down and says, hey, why do you never cover the Chinese Communist Party's responsibility for this virus? And he goes, well, do you have evidence of that? And he walks him through the chain of title of how they hid the information. And he says, well, I do. She won't give me an interview. It's like, hey, in the little ambassador that runs around and gets all the good media in town, has Jake Tapper and the guys at CNN gotten him up there and field stripped this guy for all the lies and misinformation? I mean, this information war and the economic war is everything. If we lose this, it's not going to matter. The Navy's not going to protect the South China Sea if we lose the information and economic war. Right? I mean, this is as obvious. It's so obvious, and you guys are the tip of the spear in this thing.
Well, if Brian Stelter spent less time gloating about how the TikTok app was used as a fraud at the Trump rally, then he may end up actually covering some of these stories. But this is what we're talking about. All around, imagine if this was happening on the Republican side and it was a Russian app that was being used to send fake people to a Biden rally.
We're going to get to all this. We're going to get to this next. Talk about the rally. Talk about economic warfare. Talk about information warfare. Hashtag war and pandemic. We got some great feedback, particularly from Democrats this morning. So we want to get into all that. Stay tuned. A lot more to cover in another explosive week in America and the world.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I've been in a foul mood all morning.
No.
as the War Room team can think. One of the reasons is that, and I think this is what War Room Pandemic and the whole community, this is about the country right now and the world. This is not about a political campaign. This is not about winning in November, and I got all that. That's all important, etc. But we need action, action, action now. The time for talk is over. And I don't mean not having discussions and not engaging in dialogue. And this is why I've been an advocate of a presidential commission on the policing to get into this question of systemic racism and all that and have many voices in there and argue it out as Americans are supposed to. It's something deeper, though. There is so much that needs to be done that can be done. This is not particle physics, okay? This is not the second law of thermodynamics, right? This is basic stuff that has to be done. And one of the things I'm getting more and more tired of is people making excuses and all this. It's time for action. That's what I was trying to say on Jesse Waters the other night, is that, look, I'd love the rallies. Back in 2016 and Breitbart early on, we were the first guys, I think, to start covering the rallies and start to be there. And rallies were absolutely essential and inextricably linked part of the victory in 2016. Note to self, this is not 2016, okay? We're in a fourth turning, ladies and gentlemen, and now it's evident. Everybody's sitting there going, oh, those guys are crazy about that, and, Kali Yuga. Hey, it may be, and maybe you don't believe in the cycles of history and the cyclical nature of generational thing. Hey, you don't have to. That's fine. Look at your daily life. Look at the news. Look at what's happening. Look at Chicago, okay? Look at what's happening throughout the world. Look in the streets of Hong Kong. Look at the capital markets. This is an era of turbulence, and nobody's going to come in and wave a magic wand. There's no fairy godmother out here that's going to come in and wave a magic wand and say it's all better, okay? Remember, the most powerful thing Trump has said in this entire thing, nothing is inevitable. This is what fourth turnings show you. This is why so many marginal people come up in fourth turnings are considered jokes, and at the end of it, they turn out to be the drivers of what? The drivers of action, right? Action, action, action. We need it. We need it from the White House. We also need it from Congress. Where is everybody? Why are people not around? What's going on here? And I'm not saying you shouldn't do social distancing. We're going to get back into it. I've said from day one, I've taken a lot of grief. Hey, this is a real pandemic, and here's why. It came from the CCP, okay? And the Daily Beast and all these guys can say, we're not conspiracy theory guys. I'm just going with the best evidence we now know from the intelligence apparatus of Norway and others to say, hey, you got to focus on what happened out of Wuhan and these P4 labs. We don't know this absolutely. One of the reasons that Secretary Pompeo is at Hickam Field in Pearl Harbor, the famous Hickam Field from the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Army Air Corps base at that time. Why is he there? One of the things they're talking about is the pandemic. One of the things they're talking about is sharing information, actually getting to the bottom of the truth, right? And that's still on the table. But we do know the chain of title of the decisions they made. And as Jack Maxey brings out, because Jack's at the tip of the spear of every day, on point on the pandemic, in Italy, the scientists there are saying, hey, we think it might have been in the human waste system in these cities, in Turin, in Milan, the center of the Chinese Communist Party's investment in the industrial base of Italy, which Francisco Gaglietta, the top political analyst, says is the Trojan horse in the West for the Chinese Communist Party. We now know is in the human waste system. When? December 8th. If December 8th is a date you've heard before, yes. That would be the same date that the Chinese Communist Party said, oh, it appeared in a wet market in Wuhan. Okay? This is all information warfare. This is why, Raheem Kassam and others are now at the ramparts to say, hey, look, we understand what's going on. Brian, all these people cheering about TikTok and Zoom. You must understand this. And don't listen to me. Listen to Miles Grote and all the whistleblowers. Listen to the voices of Maura Monahan, these people that have worked for their entire professional lives to free the Tibetan people, to free the people in East Turkestan, to free the house Christians, to free the people in China. Listen to their voices. They say the $600 billion a year that's taken every year in technology, which is now $3 trillion, that's just not random Chinese citizens deciding to do that. That is all an orchestrated whole of state, whole of government, whole of state process to take the technology. TikTok and Zoom are parts of the military intelligence apparatus, just like Huawei. In fact, Huawei is the PLA's technology group, right? So TikTok, don't sit there when your 15-year-old kids got TikTok and making a little thing, or they're gaming the Trump campaign. And I'm not saying American citizens can't do that. Hey, it's political thing. That's open season. You got to be smarter than that, or however it worked out. But remember that the part of the apparatus is directly tied to the Chinese Communist Party. K-pop, let's talk about K-pop for a second. The K-pop stands, I guess it is. Remember, K-pop originates, what K-pop means is the major cultural influence of Korean music and pop for many decades. The South Korean music and the whole music lifestyle and the MTV, that all has dominated all of Asia, Japan, China, all of it. Why do I know that? I helped restructure financially one of the major companies, Samsung, that was at the beginning of the K-pop thing. This is back in 1996, so 20-some years ago. My firm, we're restructuring one of the major companies over there, and that's when I got to know the power, not just the cultural power, but the economic power of K-pop. That's all coming in. Don't think for a second, and I'm not talking the actors that are doing the teenage kids or something like that. Don't think for a second that PLA unit number 32 is not all over and thinking about nonstop how they drive that on a social media basis. There's been Raheem Kassam and others that are talking about it. And now Stanford University. It's not Miles Guo and G News. It's not War Room Pandemic. It's not the National Pulse. It's not people that are dismissed by our betters at the Daily Beast and CNN, right? Our betters, right, of this. It's now not Hillsdale College, right? Not Grove City College, Stanford University, the observatory that dispassionately looks at the influence in social media. And they come out and said, hey, if you look at COVID-19, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Miles Grove pops up like number 2 or 3. And Raheem walks you through it. It's like 250 times what Russian influence was. Clapper's book says it came down to $100,000 worth of Facebook ads or something. Right. Page 149, as presented by Erin Burnett in CNN. She locked up Clapper on her show with one question. The guy was in the mumble tank. All the Russian influence, right? Russia's a sideshow, and Ukraine's a sideshow to a sideshow. You want to see information? Now we find out that the major newspapers are taking $19 million. Now, $19 million in a broad scope is not everything, but trust me, in today, when they're laying off newsrooms and doing buyouts of guys, $19 million is not bad cash. To do what? To basically take pure state propaganda, the People's Daily, and insert it in the major newspapers of the world, the Washington Post and the New York Times, right?
And don't forget the China Daily stands all over Capitol Hill.
Chinese Daily stands. The only thing that warms my heart, Epic Times now has their stands right next to them, right?
Right.
The Epic Times is fighting back. And those guys have just done a tremendous job. And everybody says, oh, they're Falun Gong. Hey, just read it and check the information out. They still do some of the best reporting. But you go up here on Capitol Hill, you got the Chinese Daily. And I think you walk into the offices, it's laying in there. They hand deliver this thing, right? If you're a subscriber to the New York Times, I think every Wednesday, if you pick up your copy of the New York Times, you got tucked in there it's called the China Daily. Hey, it's the People's Daily. It's the New York Times. It's the official paper of the Chinese Communist Party. With the tabloid is the Global Times, our nemesis.
I mean, to put this into perspective, imagine we were in 1936, 37, 38, and the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal were putting in Wednesday inserts from Der Stürmer.
Well, you say that, but there is actually an entire book about this and how the New York Times reported.
What's the guy's name? Derharty? What was the guy's name?
I can't.
Oh, you mean
the
Irish guy?
Yes,
the one who denied the famine in Ukraine.
Yes.
There's actually an entire book about how the New York Times intentionally
he was Russia. He was Soviets, not the Nazis. He was Soviets.
Intentionally suppressed stories about the concentration camps. That in World War II. It's a fascinating book. You've got to read this. But also, we've got to say this about the China Daily stuff as well. It's like all these people who are pulling down statues and everything like that. Why aren't you pulling down those China Daily stands? Because the Chinese Communist Party is doing more contemporaneously to abuse black people around the world, especially in Africa, than those statues are doing right now. There is contemporaneous slavery going on. There are concentration camps in China. You want to pull down a monument to oppression? Pull down a China Daily newsstand, okay?
Or go to
You want
West.
to see what this is about. Ulysses Grant pulled down in San Francisco on Friday, I think. Ulysses S. Grant. Lincoln desecrated in London, right? Mahatma Gandhi, Churchill, right? The greatest, if you're Antifa, the greatest anti-fascist fighter ever, the one that kept people in the game in the darkest days against the fascists, right? Francis Scott Key, because the anthem of the United States is something that's oppressive, right? So, and this is people got to, you haven't seen much of the grant. They're not doing much of the grant. They're suppressing the grant information. Ulysses Sam Grant, right? That statue, the most powerful statue in our nation's capital, is him on the horse and mud covered in front of the Capitol. Because Grant would not give up. The Confederacy would not have been defeated if it's not for Grant and Sherman and understanding absolute total warfare and unconditional surrender. You had to break the back of the plantation aristocracy, right? And they did it, and by burning Columbia, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Atlanta, Georgia, burn them to the ground. That was Ulysses Grant and General Sherman, and yet Ulysses Grant gets desecrated, and you hear very little on mainstream media because they understand you're crossing lines. We'll return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I would love to come on here every day and tell you it's all going to be better. I would. Love to pat you on the head and tell you it's going to be better. It's not, okay? And they say, oh, Bannon's hair is always on fire. Hey, just look at the world at where it is today. It's going to take human action, human agency to sort things out. They're talking about human action, human agency. If you're an entrepreneur, remember, more opportunity is going to be created. If you've got a company that does $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in revenue, that company could be $1 billion in a couple of years. The only thing that's going to stop that is you seizing the day, seizing the opportunity. The way you're going to do that, you have to have tools. You have to have operating leverage. The best leverage you can get is a software package that ties everything together. That's NetSuite by Oracle. Remember, Oracle is the #1 system on the cloud. This is a software package used by over 20,000 entrepreneurs. Your company's $1 million to $100 million. You need NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon, and get your package today. 7 steps you should be taking as an entrepreneur today. Okay. I want to get back into it. We got some great hashtag War on Pandemic. You're on fire today. We want the whole community in here. We've got a couple of great comments.
Yeah, a couple things. 2 things that were really important about this show. We try to explain this to everyone. We want a large tent. This is what we're talking about with economic nationalism. This is not about Republican, Democrat. This is about the survival of the American family, the American ideal, and American opportunity. And one of our listeners writes, hashtag War Room Pandemic, you are the only ones besides Andrew Yang that are talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution. Why not expand the conversation and see if we may be able to get some help from him and the Yang Gang in Trump's second term? You see, this is all about America. It's not about Trump. It's not about an individual. It's about moving this country forward. And then as we're talking about the destruction of our heritage, we're watching people try to erase history. One of the people who suffered under Mao Zedong in the Cultural Revolution writes something, and I think is very powerful for our readers. She says, they are targeting your shared experience. Once that is erased, your shared identity is gone. You won't be able to bond together to fight off the oppressors anymore. That's what Mao Zedong did to us in the Cultural Revolution. That's a warning for all of us.
Remember, the Cultural Revolution, they took it directly from the French Revolution. It's to destroy, and what they try to come after, the central part of it is the spiritual values of the nation, whatever that religion is at the time, the spiritual values. In China, it happened to be Confucianism, right, in the family. But definitely what they go after specifically in both cases is the nuclear family. And they put this under the patriarchy, right? That's hey, I pride myself in being the first guy to talk about patriarchy a couple of years ago in the Me Too movement. I said the Me Too movement is really a subset of the Time's Up movement, which is really about the patriarchy, and that's what they're going after. And you can see that. You can see it here. And I'm saying, hey, patriarchy's had a 10,000-year run. Maybe it's time. I came from a family. The women basically called the shots. My mom ruled the roost. God bless my dad, but he was the greatest guy in the world. But we come from a matriarchy-driven family. So this gets back to the Yang thing. You know, Andrew Yang. I think Andrew Yang and myself was the first. He jumped in when he started running about these tech companies. These tech companies are public utilities. Got to be started treated like public utilities. They got way too much power, way too much unaccountable power. We're sitting here having these arguments every day about Twitter. What Jack Dorsey? I don't give a damn about Jack Dorsey. Why Jack Dorsey makes these decisions? Jack Dorsey's going to determine what you're going to see, what you're not going to see. He's going to determine what the president of the United States, Jack Dorsey, soy boy. You know, you pick up the dictionary next to soy boy and Jack Dorsey's pictures there, beard or no beard, Jack, I don't care, still soy boy. And he's going to determine what we're going to see or not. Zuckerberg's going to determine what we're going to see or not see, right? These guys, this is all information warfare also, right? It's part of what they cover, what they don't cover. They're downplaying. You don't see blaring all weekend that they took General Grant down because they understand, hey, they probably crossed the line there. A lot of Americans are going to sit there and go, General Grant, Lincoln, right? They're coming, and Jefferson and Washington D.C. We talked about the monuments. Hey, they're going to have a vote here on D.C. statehood in the coming weeks. I'm just saying they're going to have, as part of that debate, is Washington D.C. going to stay Washington, right? This is what Trump said back in August of 2017. Where does it stop? This is the Cultural Revolution part of it. This is why we had a whole 2-hour special a couple of weeks ago with Voices from China, the people that talked about what happened in the Cultural Revolution. This is why in 72, remember, the Cultural Revolution in China starts in 66, ends in 76. In the middle of it, Nixon and Kissinger go to China because Mao is not totally in charge. He needs some help. What he's going to do is partner with the Americans to flip on the Russians, right? And in the meeting, Kissinger goes, they start talking. He says, what do you think about the French Revolution? Zhou Enlai says, too early to tell. That is one of the most profound things ever said in any meeting. Too early to tell. Talk about the long game.
Yes.
These people play the long game. Michael Pillsbury's book, and you can say about Pillsbury, look, he calls me the Uber hawk. I happen to like Dr. Pillsbury a lot on the solutions, but his book is still a must read. What's it called? The 100-Year Marathon. The 100-Year Marathon. And when you finish there, and here's what. We got it. We're tough, resilient people. This is what I said on Jesse Waters the other day. I want to stop the thumb sucking. I want to get you out of the fetal position. We're not only here to entertain you. I'm not here to pat you on the head and tell you it's going to be better. Everybody said, "Oh, Bannon, you need to give them light." No. Here's what you need to know. You're a citizen of the greatest republic in mankind's history. Okay? Of the 114 billion people or souls that science figure have been on this planet since human life started, you are here in this time and place, right? Of 114 billion, you're here in time and place. In the greatest country on earth, in the country that's provided the most freedom to the most people on earth, with all of our shortcomings and foibles. That's why it's incumbent upon you, if the Judeo-Christian West has anything it's passed down from time immemorial, it's human responsibility, right? You're made in the image and likeness of God, and you got to act like it. It's everybody's. I'm not going to pat you on the head. Guess what? It's not going to be better. This is the other thing that people miss. When Donald Trump wins and Joe Biden loses, sometime early in the morning on the 4th of November of this year, do you think it's going to get easier? Do you think all of a sudden the fairy godmother is going to float in here and say, and all the opposition are going to say, man, this is terrific. Trump came from 14 points down. He came from this debacle in Tulsa. He came from out of nowhere. He came and he won. Do you remember 2016? 2016, you look down and there's thousands of people outside of Trump Tower from the very moment he was declared at 2:30 in the morning. And they never left, right? They weren't there to say no. Do you think that's going to be any better? What do you think the inauguration is going to be like? And say, oh, Bannon, don't do it. But I'm trying to give you a reality check, okay? If you want to save Western civilization, and with it, the Alliance of Liberty that are partners in and allies in India and in Taiwan and in Japan, and yes, people of color in Africa that want liberty, not to be slaves to the Chinese Communist Party and have them take all the resources, the new colonialism, the British East India Company concept run in reverse, and in Latin America, and in Central America. You're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to fight for it every day. The BLM and the Antifa and all that, I did a film eight years ago about Antifa on Occupy and stuff like that. The one thing I will tell you, they're dedicated. They're not going to, they don't take the weekend off and play golf, okay? They're dedicated. They're dedicated to their point of view. We live in a democracy. I got that. One side's going to win, one side's going to lose. We're going to fight this out and vote. But trust me, they're going to outwork you right now. The last time we had any hard work was during the Tea Party revolt, okay? And then during the Trump movement in 2016, you had that fire, and you see social media, and people, you could feel it. Well, you don't feel it now. You don't feel it now. And for all the excuses and things about the 6,200 people that showed up, you know, TikTok and the thing and all that, hey, here's one of the things, is people are not energized. And here's why people are not energized. Nothing's happening. Well, stuff's got to happen. Action, action, action. And we need to hear your voice. And you say, what you can do, first off, you can read everything that we put up there and then more. And you should go to every site. And I don't want to hear this. Everybody say, I don't read the New York Times. I don't read the Financial. I don't read it because no, that's not good enough. You got to read all of it. Because you also have to see how it's positioned. And what will happen as you start learning and as you become more enlightened, you'll realize where the bias is. We're not here to tell you. We're here to show you, right? You've got to come to your own conclusion, but then you'll get savvy enough. Yeah, I see where that's biased. But remember, those are still the mainstream media that does drive the situation with the party of Davos and the capital markets and the global corporations. This is not conspiracy. That's in broad daylight. This is why Joe Biden, I said the other night, Jesse Waters, he's not Joe from Scranton. That's the spin. He's Joe Biden from Wilmington, Delaware. Wilmington, Delaware exists for one reason. You got a federal courthouse, and they got these towers with post office box. And you walk in, they got a little reception area, and it's the headquarters of all the global corporations. Why? The laws in Delaware favor the corporations. The federal court there has been known to be kind of the homers, right? You want to be in Delaware court, right? Joe Biden represents that. He's the concierge. Why did they have Joe Biden? Look. I meant it the other day. Joe Biden was not Einstein's cousin at the top of his game. This is not a bright guy. Even in the Obama administration, used to mock him all the time. He's not particularly swift. If you saw the HBO series with Kevin Spacey, that vice president, who happened to be from Pennsylvania in that first year, that VP, that was kind of modeled on Joe Biden. Okay, they kind of modeled on Joe Biden. Go back and look at that. Guy was not that bright. Remember, he went in one time and slipped into the desk and was like sitting at the Resolute desk, right? How would it be to be the man? That's Joe Biden. So this is not a bright guy. And this is before, and he's obviously diminished in his capacity, but that's not Joe Biden's fault. That's just his age and what he's going through. But he's clearly diminished in his capacity. You see this in the polling now among Democrats who are scared to death of that. But why was he on the Council of Foreign Relations? Why was he vice president for Obama? Remember, they thought Obama was a populist, progressive, populist, anti-war candidate. He upended the Democratic Party apparatus. Who? Oh, the same person Donald Trump beat, Hillary Rodham Clinton, right? The kind of warmonger. That's what got beaten in Iowa and the rest of that thing. And what did they do? They put adult supervision with Joe Biden because he's the corporatist guy. That's why he's on the Senate Foreign Relations. The managed decline of our country is personified in Joe Biden and Joe Biden's career. Every decision he's made, every guy that was his paymaster, right? That's why he's the senator of Wilmington, Delaware, not Joe of Scranton. That's all a spin. Wilmington, Delaware, and he's been there since a young man. And so every terrible trade deal, every terrible engagement of American foreign policy, all of it on the Senate Council on Foreign Relations, the esteemed, considered still the premier committee in the United States Senate, from Fulbright and the Vietnam War on that. That's all Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden. That's the managed decline. That's why Donald Trump is president of the United States. In 2016, that's what was quite evident. That's quite evident today, although you don't hear that too much. That's what this is about. Economic nationalism versus the globalist. We'll return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
In these turbulent times, one of the things we try to do is give you a range of alternatives of how to come to information, a range of alternatives of things that you need in your personal and your professional life. We're very proud of that. It's the whole basis of the show. We don't sit there and tell you. We try to show you, give you access to information. It's obvious in today's world economy, particularly with the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, which we talk about all the time, has exploded now up to $26 trillion. And that does not even consider the off-balance sheet liabilities. What we've done here to get through this pandemic is pretty extraordinary, but it's going to have economic impact. It's going to have economic impact on your retirement. It's now time that you must at least start to consider precious metals in either physical possession or part of the IRA program. Birch Gold Group is the top group in the country that talks about this IRA. So what we have now is birchgold.com/Bannon, Bannon. Go there. It's a 25-page report. They're not trying to sell you anything. What they're trying to do is awaken you to the possibility of including precious metals in your portfolio. Stocks, bonds, real estates, all of it. You got to look at precious metals. You owe it to yourself. birchgold.com/Bannon, Bannon, 25-page report. You need to get it, you need to read it, and you need to talk about it with your spouse today. Okay. I want to turn back to a ton of stuff blown up. Kevin Hassett's just a poppy. Kevin Hassett was announced this morning, the great head of CEA, and Kevin and I don't agree on everything. He's more of a free market guy, but just been fantastic for the president. Came through, and in this pandemic, at least was one of the voices of reason, talking about where the economic crisis was going. Announced earlier, I think on Bloomberg, they might be leaving this summer. But Poppy Harlow of CTGN, excuse me, that's such a cheap shot, of CNN. CCPNN. Now, she's tweeting that Hassett may leave as early as this afternoon or tomorrow. So I don't know what's going on there, but Kevin Hassett, a great guy, and as soon as he's out, we'd love to get him on the show. Just a fantastic guy. Raheem, this whole thing's blowing up. Yep. The Law and Order, what happened this weekend. Put it in perspective for us.
Yeah, I just want to make mention of the rally and what we're seeing on the back of the rally. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweets, you got rocked at Brad Pascal. And, I think, Brad, you did get rocked. But you got rocked by something that we should have been able to see coming a long way away. And this is the thing. And this is why I completely agree, and I didn't try and jump in on your rant in the last segment, right? Because you're talking about, hey, and there's people in the live chat right now saying, turn off CNN, it's not worth it. No, the opposite. The opposite. Here's how you get to know what's coming down the pipeline is you pay attention to what they're saying now, okay? And by the way, a lot of people say, but I can't afford to do that. I don't have the time. I can't pay for all these subscriptions to all these news outlets. I think that's BS. I think it's an excuse. I think it's a way for you to feel comfortable, but you shouldn't feel comfortable right now. The way I got into all of this was back when I was 20-something years old, barely making £20,000 a year, my first job out of university, barely making enough money to pay my rent. I had thousands of dollars I had to pay every month to commute into my job and everything. I had a couple of $100 left at the end of every month. And what I would spend it on, I was reading The New Statesman, The Economist, The Financial Times, make sure I was subscribed to every single one of those things. That's how you calculate. And you can see it right now. CNN has a headline on their website, Trump delayed sanctions on Chinese officials involved in detention camps to avoid problems with trade deal. They're talking about the Uyghurs, they're talking about this Bolton story, and you will be able to triangulate where this is going to go. A lot of you say out there, I want to help, but you'd never want to get into what would actually help. I'm not ordained with some magical power to run the national pulse and to get into these. I'm just a guy, right? And we do it like that. And here's the other thing I want to get into as a result of that rally and all of this stuff. It's this K-pop stan stuff, right? These accounts, which have 3,000, 3,200, 3,500 followers, but they get 55,000 retweets a time. Who's behind those accounts? Who's retweeting those accounts? Why don't we have a Republican senator? And ladies and gentlemen at home, why aren't you calling your Republican senators and congressmen saying we want an investigation? Not on the back of the election when you lose it, because you could lose it if it goes this way, but in advance of this election, you want to get that now. The Stanford report is telling you to do so. The Australian report is telling you to do so. Twitter themselves are accepting that they have major problems with election interference against President Trump, against MAGA, against the people who are attacking CCP and CGTN. So why aren't we getting into this now? You think all these K-pop accounts are based here in the United States? You think they're in Missouri?
Hey, how about 2 minutes to let me cover the pandemic here?
Go ahead. Yeah. That's a great rant, though.
Right. There's some interesting stuff coming out of South Korea. South Korea has been held forward as the experts on this. But one of the things that you've heard on this show, one of the things we have to remember in South Korea, the entire pandemic was pretty much isolated to a single city called Daegu, where that evangelical church infected several hundred people. Over the last week, South Korea is reporting that they have over 60 confirmed imported cases, and the head of the health ministry says if Seoul gets penetrated by the virus this time, the entire Republic of Korea gets penetrated. So it's something that we have to pay attention to, and it's something that you also it illustrates the difference between how various countries have dealt with this, right? They didn't have it all across Korea like we have had and like some other countries have. Now, the other interesting thing that came out this weekend, and a Chinese doctor, Matteo Bassetti, has said that he believes that the virus, at least inside Italy, is becoming less strong. It's causing less severe symptoms. He's saying that people who would have died, some of these patients, particularly the elderly, who he said would have died 2 months ago, now have the virus, but they're still sitting up in bed. They don't seem to be having the same
is that a mutation?
Symptoms.
What does that mean? Is that a mutation?
He's claiming that it's mutating, and we've talked about this on the show before. There was some scientists saying the same thing a few months ago from University of Arizona who were following some of the mutations in the virus, and they claimed, without a lot of coverage, that the virus seemed to be mutating along the lines of SARS-1. Now, interestingly, SARS-1 essentially was eliminated from being a problem by the end of the summer of 2003.
We'll get back to all this tomorrow. Go to the National Pulse. You're going to break this big story this afternoon. National Pulse. You can look to it through the War Room. I want to say one last thing. Remember, if you're an entrepreneur, go get right now netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon. You've got to read the 7 action steps you need to take. Remember, here we're about action, action, action. Until tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, the entire team at War Room Pandemic. See you tomorrow.